Sam was a warm water diver who thought a dry suit would just mean a warmer suit. However, her first cold water day proved every rule she knew was about to change. I'm Don, and today I'll walk you through an experienced warmer water diver, Sam, and the real world learning curve so your first dry dives feel controlled, not chaotic. And whether you're new to dry suit diving, you're interested in picking up dry suit diving, or just curious how dry suit diving differs from wetsuit diving, this video is for you. Today, you'll get an idea how buoyancy really behaves in a dry suit, how wading is different, and how to stay truly warm without surprise leaks cutting the dive short. Let's dive on in. Sam's initial surprise on her dive wasn't the temperature. It was how everything felt before she even hit the water. In a wetsuit, neoprene hugged her and moved when she moved. In a dry suit, she felt like she climbed into a personal tent, stretched with heavy seams and sealed at the neck and the wrists. The shell kept water out, but it also meant she was moving inside a bag of air that shifted when she shifted. On the dock, her first sequence looked nothing like her wetsuit routine. She cleared the zipper path, ran it fully closed, and checked for any spot that didn't seat flat. She pressed the inflator to feel a small puff and cracked the exhaust to make sure the gas could actually leave. She bent, squatted, and reached across her chest to feel where the suit bound so she wouldn't discover tight snags for the first time at 6 meters or 20 feet. Dry didn't equal warm. The shell by itself doesn't insulate much at all when in the water. There are some shells that have neoprene in them, of course, that add a little bit of warmth. But then there are other shells called trilaminate that have no insulating properties at all and are more or less over-glorified trash bags. Very expensive and very finely tuned trash bags. Warmth came entirely from undergarments that trapped air and wicked moisture away from her skin. On her first attempt, she wore thin fleece that felt okay in the parking lot, but it was chilly just 10 minutes into the dive. But on her next dive, she was overdressed, sweating through her base layer, and felt even colder when she got in the water as that sweat quickly chilled. Finding the sweet spot became a small science project for keeping cool out of the water, but comfortable when you get in the water. Water temperature, dive length, and wind at the surface all mattered more than she expected. A checklist unique to her dry suit changed her day from guesswork to confidence before the dive even began. The zipper, clean and fully shut. Seals smooth against the skin with no hair caught underneath. Inflator connected and tested. The exhaust valve or dump valve is set to a practical opening so she wouldn't need to crank it mid-dive. Undergarments chosen for the water and planned bottom time. Hood and gloves ready at hand. Sam was extra careful as she knew the suit was tough but also delicate in key areas like the seals and the zipper, so she needed to take a bit more care with the dry suit versus a wetsuit. Dry suits tend to be quite a bit more expensive than wetsuits, and while a wetsuit might tear a hole and you can keep diving with it, a dry suit, when it tears, it becomes a much less pleasant wetsuit. And the whole purpose of a dry suit is keeping you dry. And that's why, while they're not sensitive, you have to be extra diligent to make sure that dry suit continues to keep you dry. And besides the whole temperature juggling act when putting on a dry suit, there also can be some frustrations putting it on, namely with the seals around your wrists and with your head, especially for those with long hair. But as Sam quickly found out, that if she wore a bandana for her long hair, she was able to secure her hair and make sure she can pull it through the seal with relatively less problem. While a dry suit is never as easy as putting on a wetsuit, she came to respect the dry suit over time. The suit finally felt less like a costume and more like a tool when she stepped off the dock. In water, it moved easier, but a new rule introduced itself instantly. Buoyancy was about to play some different rules. And if you're enjoying this video, now is a great time to like and subscribe. I post weekly content to help divers grow their skills, build confidence, and explore the ocean with curiosity and care. And by the way, If you're interested in keeping up with the latest and greatest of the scuba diving industry, I have a free monthly newsletter that you can check out in the description below. And it's a diving experience where things start to get a little bit spicy for new dry suit divers like Sam. In a wetsuit, Sam expected neoprene to compress with depth and lift to drop in a predictable curve. She would add a little gas to the BC and call it a day. In a dry suit, however, the suit itself became a potential buoyancy device she wore like clothing. She remembered from her training that she needed to add gas to her suit as she descended to prevent the dreaded squeeze. If you continue to dive and descend, you will continue to feel your suit squeeze that life out of you. But it's simply solved by adding air with the inflator. And you don't need that much just to relieve the squeeze. And also importantly, making sure you add connecting your dry suit inflator hose to your pre-dive safety checks. But Sam was quickly finding that gas moved to the highest point of her body, and that moving that bubble started to steer her trim. At 10 meters or 33 feet, she felt her torso squeeze and her boots go light at the same time. Her fins began floating up like they had swallowed balloons. Her instinct was to kick down harder, but that only made her legs more lighter, and more gas collected there, and her upper body felt tighter. She was sliding toward an inversion without quite even realizing. However, before panic could set in, she remembered her training from her dry suit certificate. She performed something of a barrel roll to redistribute the gas in her dry suit, where she tucked at the waist to pull her torso under her feet, bringing the gas back to her upper torso and redistributing it. She then remembered to bend her knees to trap some gas in her thighs instead of letting it start to pool into her boots. If she ever needed to release air from her suit, it was important to raise her left arm with the exhaust valve so high it becomes the highest point, and she left it in auto open so the gas would exhale slowly. It took her quite some time to adjust to feeling how long it took for that gas to leave her suit. It is much different than the BCD because the dry suit is so much bigger than the BCD. Over time, she had to adapt how she was diving to accommodate that gas bubble in her dry suit. As lift eased, she leveled out and added a tiny puff to her BCD for stability, as she still used her BCD primarily to control her buoyancy. So while she could use the dry suit as her buoyancy control, she actually still used her BCD because it's a much smaller gas bubble to manage. So only enough gas in her dry suit to relieve the squeeze, and also that gas forms a bubble between your skin, the shell, and the water. And so the bigger that gas bubble, the warmer you can feel too, allowing your insulation underneath your suit to fully loft and keep you warm. For Sam's first time, she definitely felt very uneasy about controlling this new balloon outside of her BCD. It took her some time to adjust, almost as it does for all dry suit divers. But over time, the feeling goes from panic to routine trim correction. And that's where it clicked for Sam. Dry suit diving required a whole new wiring in her brain to adjust to. While a lot of experienced divers say trim is important in a wetsuit, it is downright punishing to be out of trim in a dry suit, at least out of trim intentionally. A few small habits kept the rest of her dive calm. She eventually experimented setting her dry suit dump valve to a moderate opening so the gas could leave, but it's still easier for her to retain. Because the primary goal of the gas bubble is to actually insulate, so it actually helps you stay more warm, as mentioned. Whenever Sam was ascending, she got used to raising her dump valve shoulder slightly and controlled releasing gas from her suit as micro dumps instead of large big dumps. Every 2 or 3 breaths, she paused a beat, hovered, raised her upper torso to go into positive trim a little bit, straightened her legs out to bring that gas from her boots up to her upper torso, and felt that small amount of gas leave her suit. Then she went back into a neutral trim and continued to ascend. What's really important for new dry suit divers to grasp is that you need to be more on top of that gas management. Because if you're out of trim, either in positive trim or negative trim, where your feet are up, and positive trim is when your upper torso is up, that gas will collect and basically punish your trim even more, so it's even harder to break and redistribute that gas. And what you don't want is a potential uncontrolled ascent where that gas continues to expand and continues to make you ascend faster. That's why it's better to get used to small micro dumps as you ascend. And so while you are consciously going up from the depth, you want to pause, let gas out, hover, and then continue to ascend every little bit. Building that habit will make sure you stay on top of your gas management as you ascend. Training will stitch the skills together faster than trial and error. For Sam, this training started in pool sessions that let her practice, vent, recover from feet up, and stabilize mid-water without surf or current. And she did all this while getting her Drysuit certification with a fantastic instructor. And then during that same course, she went to the open water and put all that work into real depth, task loading, and of course, the cold. By the time buoyancy felt like second nature, the next truth had surfaced right where most dives begin and end. Wading was its own skill now, and getting it right made everything else feel much easier. During Sam's certification training, she was given a lot more weight than she was ever used to before. This was for her training, but she was urged to utilize her wading skills from her prior experience and again to apply those to Drysuit diving. Sam's wetsuit habit was to remember a number and add or subtract a pound for small changes in different wetsuits. But here comes the Drysuit and destroyed that thinking. Undergarments added real buoyancy, and her tri-laminate suit didn't compress like neoprene wetsuits. Her wading now started with what she wore under the shell. She learned it was even more critical to begin each new configuration with a shallow water weight check. Full kit on, usual starting gas, suit vented to comfort, and BCD nearly empty. She should hover at about eye level on a normal breath in, and when she exhaled, she could be able to sink. With steel cylinders, which are common for Drysuit diving, she realized her cylinders wouldn't be nearly as light as aluminum cylinders at the end of the dive. But she would still also test again at the end of the dive with nearly empty cylinders to make sure she was not positively buoyant. She learned sometimes it wasn't about instantly nailing it, but experimenting over a few dives as long as she was not absurdly overweighted, which would be extremely dangerous if something were to happen to her BCD. Sam has heard horror stories of things going wrong to Drysuit divers when they were overweighted, so she was determined to ensure she knew how to weight herself. She realized how important of a skill this is. She also slowly got used to controlling her trim better, and while she did choose heavier, negatively buoyant fins to help her a bit with weighing her legs down, she eventually developed stronger muscle of controlling the gas in her suit through her posture and trim. She ultimately realized heavier fins and even ankle weights were more of a crutch than a necessary need. And what was amazing is as Sam grew in her Drysuit handling skills, she also noticed a crossover that her excellent trim and controlling a Drysuit is now helped her achieve even more excellent trim in a wetsuit, which was a surprising benefit of Drysuit diving. But just when Sam was getting the hang of things, leaks were the lesson Sam did not want but never forgot. On one casual dive, Sam's zipper started to leak, starting with a very mellow drip and then basically burst mid-dive. In a wetsuit, that would have been annoying and manageable. In a Drysuit, it collapsed aloft of her underlayer, destroyed her ability to use the Drysuit as a buoyancy control, and dragged heat from her core to her appendages and slowly started losing all of her heat. After several moments, she felt a throbbing cold and the creeping shiver despite her attempts to fix the zipper. She then turned to her dive partner and signaled to abort the dive and go up. From that point on, it's better to get back to the surface and warm up than attempt diving cold, as she was well aware that being too cold could drastically increase her decompression sickness, let alone hypothermia risk. But with some slight drama of ending one dive early, making it back to the surface, and getting her dry suit repaired, Sam was back in action for more cold water diving to dive another day. Ultimately, Sam came to cherish her dry suit and saw out how important routine checks were, ensuring those seals and that zipper are set well, along with a slew of other additional checks that you have to add to your pre-checks. She reflected on how much of a pain dry suit used to be diving in, and that she thought she'd never get used to it. But here she was, enjoying many cold water dives, and her buoyancy and trim had never been as good as it is now. It even carried over to her warmer wetsuit diving habits and made her a much better diver. She may have called one dive, but it's made her realize how important her suit and her journey was to her. The fire is in Sam, as now she's opened up a whole new world of scuba diving, cold water diving. And she's even realized that dry suit is even beneficial in warmer water diving. You just have to change out your undergarments and plan accordingly. So in the end, Sam found herself much more attached to her dry suit than she ever realized. Sam rose to the challenge and eventually conquered dry suit diving. She took a lot of precautions and took it slow though. It's important to realize it is a different beast than wetsuit diving. It's harder, but not impossible. And Sam was a better diver for it. So, are you planning to learn dry suit diving? Let me know your story in the comments below. I have some other great videos to help dive deeper into dry suit diving from here, starting with the anatomy of your dry suit here and some tips operating it while diving here. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.